There is a type of athlete the world is not prepared for, one who does not build toward greatness but arrives inside it fully formed, like a lightning strike with no warning clouds. In the summer of 1990, Italian football produced exactly one such man, and the world has spent 3 decades trying to understand what it witnessed. He was not on anyone's list of players to watch. He had not been groomed by a great academy or developed by a famous coach. He was 30 years old and had never played a single minute of international football before the tournament began. And then he scored 6 goals and took the Golden Boot from the greatest players alive. To understand how this was possible, you have to go back to the very beginning, to a part of Italy that football had almost entirely forgotten, and to a childhood that could have ended the story before it ever started. The Zen district of Palermo was not a place that produced footballers, or at least not ones the rest of the world ever heard about. It was one of the most economically deprived urban areas in all of southern Italy, a place where children played in concrete courtyards because there was nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. The boy who would one day make the whole of Italy scream his name grew up here, the son of a working-class Sicilian family, surrounded by noise and difficulty and an absolute refusal to accept limitation. From the moment he could run, the ball was the only thing that made sense to him. But loving football and being chosen by football are two completely different things, and for most of his early years, the scouts and the clubs and the system seemed to have made a collective decision that this small, unpolished boy from the wrong part of Sicily simply did not fit. He was signed by Palermo as a teenager but spent years cycling through reserve teams and youth setups, never quite breaking through, always being told he was promising but not yet ready, a sentence that can hollow a young man out entirely if he hears it often enough. He did not make his professional debut until he was 22 years old, an age by which many footballers have already played hundreds of matches. The path had been so slow, so grinding, that most people in Italian football had simply stopped paying attention. He played for Messina in Serie C, scoring goals that very few journalists ever wrote about, in front of crowds that were sometimes smaller than a school assembly. Every week he performed without anyone watching, and every week he came back and did it again. If you had asked any serious football observer in Italy in 1988 to name the players most likely to one day win a World Cup Golden Boot, they would have given you 100 names before his. And this is the moment to ask yourself, how many stories like this one have simply vanished without anyone ever telling them? Football Untold exists to find exactly these stories, the ones that fell through the cracks, the ones the mainstream never told. If you want more of them, follow this channel, because every week there is another truth waiting to be uncovered. Juventus eventually came calling in 1988, which sounds like the fairy tale version of the story, and in some ways it was. But there is a version of Juventus that is not the glamour club of the Champions League era, and a version of signing for Juventus that does not mean you have made it. His first season at Juventus produced 15 goals in Serie A, a number that made people sit up and take notice, but which was still dismissed by many as a statistical curiosity rather than evidence of a genuine elite player. He was too old to be a wonderkid and too unknown to be taken seriously as a star. Then came the summer of 1990, and Italy hosted the World Cup, and the national team coach Azeglio Vicini made a selection decision that confused almost everyone in Italian football by including this rough-edged Sicilian striker who had never worn the Azzurri shirt. He was not in the starting 11. He sat on the bench for Italy's first group stage match, watching, waiting, while more celebrated names took the field under the Roman lights. For 20 minutes nothing changed, and it seemed like the selection might have been a sentimental gesture rather than a tactical decision. And then he came on. And within moments something shifted in the energy of the entire stadium, something that is almost impossible to describe in tactical terms but that every person watching felt immediately. He ran as if the game was already running away from him and he was furious about it. He scored. In his first ever World Cup appearance, as a substitute, against Austria, he scored. And the way he celebrated told you everything about what the previous 15 years of struggle and silence had felt like, because it was not a controlled celebration, it was an eruption. Italy won, and the nation noticed him, but nobody yet understood what they were looking at. He was a footnote, a pleasant surprise, a late substitute who had done his job. The real story of that tournament, everyone assumed, would be written by someone else. But he scored again, and again, match after match, goal after goal, in a rhythm that became almost hypnotic to watch. By the knockout rounds he was not a surprise anymore, he was the tournament. Every opposition defense was now specifically planning around stopping him. The eyes became iconic. Italian television cameras learned to find his face at every moment of tension, and what the lenses captured was something primal. A hunger so undisguised and so raw that viewers across the world found themselves unable to look away from him. Italy marched through the tournament on the back of his goals and his energy, and an entire country that had been hesitant about this unknown Sicilian began to build something around him. A belief, a projection of their own desire to overcome, a symbol they had not known they needed. 6 goals. Across 6 matches, against some of the best defenses on earth, he scored 6 goals and claimed the Golden Boot of the 1990 World Cup ahead of players who had spent their entire careers being celebrated as the greatest of their generation. It was not supposed to happen, and it happened anyway. Italy lost in the semifinals to Argentina on penalties, a defeat that broke the hearts of a nation, and the image of him standing on the pitch afterwards, unable to process the end of something so total and so brief, became one of the defining photographs of that entire era of football. He finished the tournament as its highest scorer, its most talked about figure, and arguably its most surprising story in decades. And then, almost immediately, the world moved on. And so, in ways he could not control, did the magic itself. The seasons that followed were difficult in ways that people who witnessed only the summer of 1990 never fully understood. The expectations that now surrounded him were built on 30 days of extraordinary football, and sustaining that level against defenders who now studied him obsessively proved impossible. He played on, moved between clubs, scored goals, fought injuries, and slowly faded from the very center of Italian football consciousness to its edges. A trajectory that is heartbreaking only if you forget that most footballers never reach the center at all. He eventually finished his playing career in Japan, at the Jubilo Iwata club, a journey that brought him peace and warmth and an appreciation that he perhaps did not always receive back in Italy, where he was sometimes remembered as a curiosity rather than the genuine phenomenon he had been. What Salvatore Schillaci left behind is something much more complex than a golden boot and 6 goals. He left behind proof that the football system, with all its academies and scouts and statistics, is capable of almost entirely missing a player until the world's biggest stage forces everyone to finally look. There are children in broken neighborhoods right now who run with that same hunger, that same refusal to disappear, that same fire burning in oversized eyes. Most of them will never get their tournament. He did, and for 30 extraordinary days he used it completely. His name belongs in every conversation about the 1990 World Cup, not as a footnote but as its truest heart. The man who proved that football, at its most unpredictable and most human, can produce a moment of pure unrepeatable grace from the most unlikely place imaginable. Every generation of football has its hidden stories, its overlooked giants, its 30-day miracles that deserved 1,000 more retellings. Football Untold is here to find every single one of them, and if this story moved you, follow this channel, because the next untold truth is already waiting for you.